looking those children in the eyes. The first words she said, I didn't think anybody would come.
Oh, dude. Paul Hutchinson built a $48 billion investment empire. Then at the height of wealth and power, he walked away to go undercover for the next decade.
Human trafficking and then child trafficking. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, but it's hidden. It's hidden in plain sight.
So you're like at the top of your game, and then suddenly you shift and go into the depths of hell. He led over 70 missions in 15 countries, rescuing more than 70,000 children. He's the man behind the hit movie Sound of Freedom and the founder of Liberating Humanity. This is the story of a man who risked everything to bring our children home.
The worst thing you can do is go undercover in Mexico. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. We had traffickers with guns on us.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is where shit hits the fan. He says that there's 10% of the population of that city that's involved in trafficking. You can't go. Paulie said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. They had brought some of the kids out. One of them was a 11-year-old. It's this child. At that moment, sitting in front of that child, seeing the fear in her eyes, I made a promise to God, myself, to that little girl, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity. Well over 70,000
Oh my gosh.
victims are now back to their families, and hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of the awareness.
And this is not just a movie, this is real life, and this is YALLCAST, and welcome, Paul Hutchinson, my good friend. So glad to see you, brother.
I sure love you, brother.
Yeah.
Super grateful for you, for your support, for your friendship over the years. So excited to spend some time with you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're in town, and I'm glad you got some time to come over here. This is really, really exciting to me. So I've got a bunch of questions, but how are you doing?
I'm incredible.
Yeah.
So grateful.
Yeah.
My book, The Sound of Freedom, came out just a few days ago, and it hit Amazon bestseller today.
Awesome.
And it's on the way to be some other bestsellers. So I'm just really grateful for our team, grateful to God, grateful for the process of just stepping into that best version of what I can do with my life.
So you started a multi-billion-dollar real estate hedge fund, is that correct?
Yeah, when I started, it wasn't multi-billion.
Right. You grew it to
we
multi-billion.
were broke, but yeah, I remember when John Pennington and I are the co-founders of a company that was called Bridge Loan Capital that morphed into Bridge Investment Group. And, in the beginning, people asked John, hey, did you see it? Did you know it was going to be billions? And he said, well, no, but somehow Paul kind of saw it. He talked about a story where, I'm sitting there making calls. We have a deal where we needed $25,000 by Friday. And I'm calling investors trying to get an extra $25,000, to put into this deal. And I hung up the phone and I turned around, I put my pinky to my mouth, kind of like in Austin Powers, I said, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. And he said, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday. You're right. Let's
Stop with the billions. We need 25 grand.
But yeah, now today, Bridge Investment Group is now over 48 billion in assets under management. I retired completely in 2017. I'm still an owner, still a founder, still get checks. Had at the time 4,000 people that knew how to run the company better than me. We grew it to a pretty big team, and now they've thinned it down. I think they're only about 2,000 employees, but significantly bigger. So just really grateful for that journey as well.
Huge. So you had an interesting story you told me about how you kind of scooted out of that and into part of what I would probably say is the darkest part of the world I've ever heard of. Can you unpack just the beginning of that part of your story?
Yeah, I would say that the real beginning started when I was in high school.
Okay.
I lived in a very protected bubble in my own home, had no idea the challenges that a lot of people were going through. And in high school, I was recruited by our principal to be the president of something called the Peer Leadership Team, which helps kids with domestic abuse and suicide prevention, et cetera. And I was put through a course throughout the summer as a peer counselor, and it was there that I came to realize the magnitude of the problem of abuse, of sexual abuse. They're literally 1 in every 4 women that we know was a victim of sexual abuse
One
as a
in
child.
four?
1 in 4 as a child. As a child. Now, that's under 18. Now, I believe the number is higher than that.
Why?
Because the average age of somebody talking about that kind of abuse as a child, the average age is 52 years old.
Oh, when they have an outcry type
When
event?
they actually talk about it, disclose it. And most people don't disclose, especially men. You know, men will hold that in. And here's what happens.
Well, that's what we're supposed to do, right? Hold everything
Yeah,
in.
you know, so many men, they're like,
Get a heart attack and stomach acid.
that thing that happened to me when I was 8, you know, I'll be less of a man if I talk about it. No, you won't. You were 8.
Yeah.
It was a horrible thing that happened from a person holding on to a lot of negativity, a lot of pain. And just the act of talking about it releases so much of the pain, so much of the trauma. And most importantly, talking about it takes the chances of passing that on from 30% down to almost 0.
So you're saying that just if somebody was abused as a kid, just the fact that they're talking about it takes the chances of them doing that to someone else down to 0?
So the percentage, the percentage of people who go through that childhood trauma that pass it on to others, if not giving the help, the love, the healing that they need, is almost 30%. It's 1 in 3.
Oh my gosh.
Now, God bless them, the men, the women who go through that become protectors. The majority of people become protectors.
Good.
Those protectors are usually people who talk about it, say, hey, this was almost every one of my undercover operators were abused as children themselves. And they grew up to be valiant protectors of children. Nobody will ever hurt a child on my watch type of an energy. And so it's so important to be able to be in a place where, yes, you can release those things that happen to us. They don't define us today. That is not something. And sadly, what happens, even if for most people even that hold on to it, you know, they don't pass it on. But what happens is it comes out in anger issues and low self-esteem, or addictions to alcohol and pornography, or anxiety, depression, PTSD. These are all things that we carry throughout our life that contribute to things like suicide, contribute to broken marriages, contribute to abuse of things like alcohol, etc. These are because of unhealed wounds.
Yeah.
And that's where the beginning of my understanding of this problem came from. Now,
so that was in high school, and then you went to college. Where did you grow up? What state?
I went to the University of Utah. You know,
okay.
I was going to be a surgeon, wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist. You know, not a regular doctor, but a surgeon, not a regular surgeon, but a heart surgeon, not a regular heart surgeon, but one that operated on children. Yeah. And
underachiever.
Well, it was funny. I got in a major car accident. Like, this wasn't funny, but it was funny about that. I got in a major car accident 2 months before taking the MCAT. And I lost the mobility of my hand. I still have scars from 35 years. I still have the freeway in me from 35 years ago. And they told me, they said, well, we don't know if you'll have the dexterity.
Yeah, no more dexterity.
To be a surgeon. And it was sad. I was 15 years as a pianist, and there was all kinds of things that just kind of went downhill in one shot. And they said, well, you can be a regular doctor. And I said, I don't want to be a regular anything. I said, if I'm gonna be like
regular,
I said, if I'm gonna be a garbage man, I'm gonna own the dump.
Right.
That's how I think. Right.
Yeah.
And so I changed my major to business and finance, and I built a company. My first successful company helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. It was a
so there was a big imprint when you were a kid then that led you to all this stuff.
Yeah. The company that I started was called Midwest Center Marketing. I own the international marketing rights for Lucinda Bassett's Attacking Anxiety and Depression program, the Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety, and then build out a team, almost 200 employees by the time I sold that company. Sold it at 29 years old, did pretty well in the sale, enough to start investing big in real estate. And then I realized if I didn't hire a guy smarter than me, I was going to lose all my money in real estate. So I put together a power team, build up a very successful fund.
So you're like at the top of your game and top of what people would consider super success. And then suddenly you shift and decide to pause that and go into like the depths of hell.
Darkness. Oh.
So tell me how that story happened. What did you do that just was like, I got to do something?
I received a phone call from our attorney general, and he said, Paul, he said, I know that you've donated a lot to child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors at the time and some other things. And he said, I need to talk to you about something that's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Good people don't know that it's happening. He said he started talking about human trafficking and then child trafficking. And I couldn't understand that. Why? I thought that slavery disappeared at the time of Abraham Lincoln. And I realized that no, there's actually more today than all 300 years of the transatlantic slave trade put together.
Wow.
But it's hidden. It's hidden in plain sight. And there's a lot of this is going on with kids. And so through that, I got connected with a group, some former Homeland Security and former CIA guys who were working in Latin America. And in Colombia, they had identified 20 children that they knew were being trafficked by some pretty bad guys down there. And one of them had 14 that he was trafficking himself. And they needed $50,000 to help rescue those kids. So I helped to make that happen. And then a few weeks later, I get a phone call from the operator. And he said, Paul, he said, I'm here in Cartagena. There's not just 20 children. There's way more than 50 here that we've identified. More than 100 children in other rings and other cities. He said, we believe that we could rescue them all at the same time. He said, if we take down just one ring, the others are going to go into hiding and it's going to be hard to get them. We have to do a simultaneous sting with all of them. He said, we can rescue more than 100 kids in one day, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much?
How much money?
Yeah, I thought it was, how much do you need? He says, well, it's going to be over $250,000. He said, but more than that, he said, I need you.
Oh boy.
I said, you need me? He said, yeah. Can you be in Colombia in 2 days?
2 days? 48 hours he gave you to get down to Colombia?
Well, and I wasn't even at home. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm like, I don't have time to go home and change. Tell me what you need. He says, well, the head trafficker has a piece of property that he wants to develop into a child brothel resort.
Oh,
like a Jeffrey Epstein Island.
Yeah, okay.
Right? He needs a few $1 million to build it out. He believes he could make tens of millions of dollars a year selling these victims to wealthy Americans. And he has connections with all the traffickers. So we need to get him to call these guys and get them to bring all their kids to the same place at the same time. He said, the only way that we can figure that we can do that is if this guy believes that you're willing to fund his project under one condition.
So you had to go down as the money guy.
The money guy, yeah. And I was to tell him, hey, you know what? If I'm interested in your project, but I need to make sure that you have the inventory of the product, quote unquote, to fill it. And so we're going to have a party in a couple of weeks. I'm going to bring my buddies.
So is this the basis of the story of the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you watch The Sound of Freedom, you know, the Jim Caviezel plays a part of a Homeland Security agent. Really, there was multiple operators, some CIA guys, et cetera, that were there. Eduardo Verástegui is the producer of the film, and he plays the part of Pablo Delgado, the $1 billion fund manager that goes.
Pablo.
Yeah, there's the Pablo. Yeah,
there's the Paul.
So so that was the basis of it, and that's really what happened. Is I was the,
so that was your first deal, your
that was
first
my very
mission.
first mission, yeah.
And then so you go do this, you rescue the kids, and then you go back home. How do you recover from something like that when you got home? Because that had to be, I know you've seen lots of scary stuff. How do you yourself recover from that when you get home?
I kept thinking about looking those children in the eyes. One experience while I was there is they had brought some of the kids out. One of them was a 11-year-old, and she had long braids. She had a little kitty cat on her shirt. And as I was sitting down, she's standing up. We were about eye level, almost like you and I are right now. There's this child. And I made a promise at that moment, sitting in front of that child, seeing the fear in her eyes, I made a promise to God, myself, to that little girl, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil.
Whoa.
And
Wow.
they weren't supposed to tell the kids that we were the good guys, but you know, after the agents came and stormed the party and arrested everybody, me included, the bad guys think that I got extradited to the U.S. to stand trial. And 30 Child Protective Services people came in with the children, and they started singing with them. They were trying to calm them down and laughing with them. And compared to the crying that I heard half an hour before, that laughing, that singing, that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard.
Wow.
And I
bet.
turned to the operator with me. I said, bro, I spent my whole life making money, making rich people richer. I want to make a difference. And he said, Paul, sadly, there's a lot of demand for stuff like this that comes from guys like you. What do you mean, guys like me? And I realized over time that the common thread with these perpetrators and these traffickers, the common thread wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos down their necks. The common thread was arrogance and greed and lust and pride.
lust,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And be full disclosure, 10 years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul effing Hutchinson. You know,
I remember you told me
built a multi-billion-dollar company, and I had at one point I had two helicopters. You're right. I had I had a plane. I had 57 vehicles that I had to pay for registration each year. I had, you know, a house with 10 bathrooms, 8 private suites, 7 fireplaces, 3 kitchens, a basketball court in my basement. And this was the life I was living. And I realized the darkness in the world was largely because of people kind of like me. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I wasn't hurting anybody, but how was arrogance and greed and lust
more
playing a part in my life?
Yeah.
You know, and so he said, Paul, he said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. And that was the beginning of what ended up with over 70 undercover child rescue missions.
70?
70 missions in 15 countries over a period of 10 years.
So you yourself for over 10 years went on 70 missions.
Yeah, and most of them I either led or played a key part in each one of those missions.
Wow. How many kids over that time did you guys rescue?
So I have the Child Liberation Foundation today. We worked with some other foundations back then that through our foundation and others that I've helped to start and fund, well over 7,000 victims are now back to their families. But that's a small number compared to the influence. For example, Tony Robbins came with one of the events that I did with a former foundation, and he saw this was a rescue that I led in Haiti, and he saw that firsthand. And through Tony and his audience, over 70,000 children are now rescued and back to their families. So what he's funded with other foundations. And beyond that, the movie, almost 100 million people have seen The Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, great movie.
And hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of the awareness.
Oh, that's awesome. God bless you, man. That's really, really cool.
God does bless me, and I'm super grateful for that.
Well, I've got a whole bunch of questions, and I don't know. I know we've got a short amount of time. How much does it cost to run one of those missions? I know you said 50 grand that one time, and then
we averaged about $2,000 per child is what it costs to pull them out of hell. In fact, a beautiful story on that, real quick one. My current wife, you've met her. What a sweetheart.
Beautiful girl.
You know, and we met in Haiti. I tell people meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when she's donating her time at an orphanage in Haiti, that's
a level up 10x.
Amazing. And, you know, after we were first dating, I got nominated to receive the Ellis Island Medal of Honor.
Wow.
Which is a beautiful honor. They shut down the island and do this big thing. And I had to wear a tuxedo and you know, at the time in my ego self, I literally had 7 different colors of tuxes that I owned, right? I had all this crap. And so I wanted to figure out what color I wanted to wear. And I called her up and I said, hey, I says, what color is your gala dress that you're going to wear to this? She said, "Oh, I don't have a gala dress." I said, "Oh, well, we should fix that."
We got to go shopping.
Went shopping. I found her a beautiful dress. It was about $2,000 dress. And as we were walking towards the checkout, she stops. She's looking at the tag and she said, "Paul, what's the average cost of rescuing a trafficked child?"
Oh boy.
I said, "It's about $2,000.
Wow.
She said, "I'm not wearing a child."
Wow. Oh. 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 I'm laughing because I don't want to cry.
She
But
said,
dude, what a kick to the stomach.
Yeah, she said, "You can buy me a $200 dress and we can donate the rest to the foundation."
What a pretty woman.
Yeah.
Inside and out.
Yeah, that's when I realized that we were in full alignment. She's now the executive director of the Child Liberation Foundation, and manages. We make an impact on over 6,000 children a month now in terms
Wow.
of the safe houses that we have healing programs for, and the certification programs that we do for teachers. And
Well, we're kind of
doctors, et cetera.
dovetailing then. Let's shift into that. So, like, after these kids are rescued, I know you had told me that there's a high chance and probability that these traffickers or pimps are going to try and scoop them back up, or the families can't afford to keep them. So you set in place a bunch of different systems to help these kids from being trafficked back and just kind of getting in a roundy round back into the system. How did you do that?
Yeah, well, we realized that sadly a lot of the traffickers were trafficked themselves as children.
Really?
It's just generational abuse that's happening within the system, and we all know that hurt people hurt other people, and healed people can heal the world. And so we put a lot of our focus onto the healing side, emotional healing, especially with these kids who have been through hell. And we found that the majority of these children who are taken come from broken homes or runaways or a broken foster care program. However, there's a large number of these kids that sleep in their own beds at night and their parents didn't know what was going on.
Oh, somebody within the family was molesting?
Yeah. Over 90% of children who are abused sexually, it's familial. It's a family member, it's a neighbor, and in some cases, it becomes a form of trafficking. You need a relation. People will leave the Sound of Freedom movie and they'll say, I want to do something. I want to go rescue kids. Yeah. The worst thing you can do is go undercover in Mexico. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children.
Yeah.
People are like, well, how does that help? Well, you need a relationship with your kids where they can very comfortably come to you and say, "Hey, Dad, our Aunt Mary was babysitting us, and every time she babysits us, she shows us pornography, and now she's telling me that she's giving me drugs, and now she's telling me that I'm going to lose my virginity anyway, and that if I lose it to these guys, that she's going to pay me $500. This is a real story. This happened on one of our rescues. The parents had no idea what was going on. The aunt was trafficking her.
Was grooming the kid?
Yep, was grooming her. And this happens a lot. You need a relationship with your kids where they can easily come to you and say, "Hey, Dad, I messed up. I was on my game whatever online, and I met a girl on there, and she sent me some topless pictures, and I sent her some pictures, and now she wanted videos. I sent those, and now she says she's going to send them all over the school unless I send money." And I don't think it's a 13-year-old girl. It's probably not. It's a 45-year-old dude.
Yeah, some Russian dude.
Exactly, and they're exploiting
guy.
these kids, or in some cases, they're putting them in a position where they're or go over to your friend's house and her brother took pictures of them while they're changing, and now he's gonna use that as exploitation.
Using it, and then they're blackmailing them to do other things.
Happens all the time.
How would you how so I'm really trying to gear this podcast towards people, young kids, 13 to 25, who are kind of in the middle of the shit, so to speak. I mean, it's open for everybody. We all need help. We all need knowledge. But so how would a kid recognize and identify that they're being groomed?
That's a great question. First thing is, that the bad guys in today's world are very seldom sitting in a black alley.
Right.
The bad guys are in your kid's backpack or in their back pocket, you know, and their phones, their access to the internet. And, you know, I encourage kids. I said, it's good for you to have a social media life, but that social media life doesn't have to be accessed by the entire world. What if it's just your friends that get to see your locations and where you are and what you're doing? You know, we had a situation in Cancun, Mexico, where a trafficker who was offering children up as young as 7 years old, and he was grooming foreigners. He would go online and he would identify children, teenagers, 13, 14-year-old girls who looked like they were down there partying with friends or with an older sibling without parents or whatever else. And he would send them instant messages and say, hey, I'm a guide down here and I can take you on a trip on my boat if you want to. And he was taken, and if they were in a position where he could get away with it, he would drug them, take their passports, and then put them in a very horrible situation.
Suddenly they're stuck because they can't.
Exactly. And it happens a lot.
So a lot of the doorways then are through social media and instant messaging.
That's a lot of the challenges today. Number one. Number two is a familial. If you've got an adult who's not your parents, who is trying to get extra close to you, a red flag, a blaring red flag is any time where they say, hey, you know, you should trust me more than your parents.
Oof. Right.
Or we should have secrets just between us that you don't tell your parents or anybody else. Any kind of secrets, or trust me more. Those are huge red flags. And sadly, the kids that get brought into this don't have a parent that's paying a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And so, you know, our foster care program is wrought with problems. A huge percentage of the kids are abused. A very large percentage are also, if they are run away from the foster care program, they're literally just names erased. Nobody's looking for them.
Wow.
And so those kids are in a huge at-risk position.
Is there one population of kids more at risk than others? I mean, like kids of single moms or divorced families?
For sure.
Or
and again, that's
socioeconomic, or is it rich kids, poor kids?
Well, the rich kids have the higher chances of being abused by their rich uncle and their rich grandpa, who carries a lot of credibility with the family, and
nobody wants to go against them.
Exactly. The poor kids, of course, then they have a higher propensity of, you know, having somebody try to lure them in with money or whatever else. Hey, we'll pay you this. But it's a problem. Now, the ones that are taken are very seldom from a healthy home.
Yeah.
Affluent or not affluent. Okay. If you've got a mom and dad are paying attention, the traffickers don't want to deal with the wrath of a dad who will leave everything to destroy their lives, right? And so they're purposely looking for kids from broken homes.
Got it.
So I tell people this, you know, I'm if you have a 1 in 2 chance of getting a divorce, you know, which, you know, I'm the preaching to the choir here. I went through 2 divorces, right? So, you know, average American, 50% or higher divorce rate. If I told you that you could do one thing every day, it would only take you 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes a day. Take that from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,000 chance of getting a divorce. People are like, that's a really big jump. I want to know what it is.
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Super simple.
Pause. Let's take a commercial break. I don't have any sponsors yet. That's a cliffhanger right there.
It is right there. This will surprise a lot of people. Couples who pray together every single day, the average divorce rate is 1 in 1,152 versus
1,152 to 1.
1,152 versus 1 in 2 of the average family in the U.S. And so I'm not pushing any religious anything. Just you don't have to say, "Oh, our Father," and you have to memorize anything. Just hold hands and say, "Hey, God, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. You know, for this day, help us with this, whatever." And you know, spend that time to receive those answers. But that one thing alone is
a pretty good statistic.
It's amazing. It's off
huge
the charts.
Statistic.
You know, and you can look it up online. You know, 1,152. They did some studies on it. That's the average divorce rate of couples who pray together every day.
Well, that's huge. So I guess that would also translate into praying with your kids as a couple.
Absolutely. And that's even higher. They always say families that pray together stay together.
Yeah.
And there's the proof, scientific proof right there.
Drowning in blue light. It's messing with your melatonin and focus. Find your calm. Protect your vibe with Lucia Eyes.
Grab a pair at luciaeyes.com. We block blue light, not sleep. Use code YALLCAST for 20% off. Let me take, can we jump back into the mission part of it? So you did 70 missions, either directly or indirectly involved.
Oh, I was directly involved in 70. I was indirectly involved in a lot more.
Oh, sorry.
So I was on the ground 70 plus times. Yeah.
Tell me the most scary story of the shit hitting the fan for you.
There was a few.
Okay.
That, one of which was, we were in Mexico City, and we had identified some children that were being trafficked from a place called Tenancinga, which is a very dangerous place in Mexico. The head of the federal police wouldn't even let us go in. He said, listen, he showed us pictures of federal agents that had gone in, that had gotten decapitated. He says that there's 10% of the population of that city that's involved in trafficking. You can't go. So I'm like, I want to cut the head off the dragon. What else do we do? So we followed some of the lines, and we identified a big group that was sending children into Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And so in Puerto Vallarta, we had gone in. I had spent almost 4 months in doing undercover work. We had found 48 children.
Wow. And
a whole bunch of traffickers. And one of the traffickers, we call him Scarface. He had this big scar down his neck, really bad dude. He was selling 9, 10-year-old kids. Ugh. And I didn't trust any of the local police, because half the time they're
on the payroll.
Yeah, exactly. And so we flew 2 federal agents from Mexico City to come and help us set up the sting. It was just a few days before the sting. I called each one of the traffickers, made sure that they were there and ready. And
so you're again acting as the purchaser.
I'm acting as the buyer. I told them, listen, my boss is coming into town.
Boss, so you're the coordinator.
I after the first year, I started going deep cover, where I would go at 2 a.m. in downtown Port-au-Prince, Haiti, connect with the traffickers in some really dangerous places. So that's where I was in this one. And I told him, I said, listen, my boss is coming into town. Bring all the inventory that you showed me. Because we have to do this simultaneous sting. Otherwise, everybody just kind of hides like cockroaches, right? And so there was one I couldn't get a hold of. The Scarface is one I couldn't get a hold of, and we had to take him down. So I told the 2 federal agents, you stay here in the hotel. I'm going to go back out. We're going to find this guy. Because if I have 2 Mexican guys with me, it kind of blows my cover a little bit. So I'm out there with a couple of my operators, talking to some taxi drivers. I said, listen, can you get us in touch with this taxi driver? He happens to know this guy. And sure enough, I says, listen, I'll give you $100 if you can get him to call me. Just tell him Pablo's in town. We're going to have a party. It's all good. And sure enough, he calls me. He goes, hey, yeah. I says, hey, I need to get a hold of Scarface. Where is he? He says, they're yeah, let's meet about that. I said, okay, where do we want to meet? I says, I'm down by the boardwalk. He says, I'll meet you by the boardwalk. Okay. So
this is a taxi driver.
Yeah, this is a taxi driver who was working with the cartel that had originally connected me with him. So we're sitting by the boardwalk waiting for him. And then out of the blue, on all sides, 10 officers, full automatic weapons, on the ground.
Oh, like Mexican police?
Mexican police arresting us, right?
Federales jumping you.
So we're laying there on the ground. We're getting handcuffed. Now, I'll show you a video of it after. This, I still have, and I had handcuff marks that are super hard. I still have nerve damage right here. If I touch this, my whole thumb tingles from the nerve damage from getting handcuffed.
They locked you up so hard?
Super hard. So we're laying there on the ground, and I'm thinking, okay, we spent 4 months on this case. I would rather spend 3 days in Mexican prison than to lose those 48 kids. I don't want to blow our cover.
Are you scared you're going to get shot?
Well, it gets worse.
Okay. Sorry. Keep going. I'll shut up.
So, yeah. So we then, they pick us up and they put us in the back of the police pickup truck. They've got, the one where they've got the benches on the side. Right. The federales are holding their guns, sitting on these benches. We're laying there on the ground of the truck. They've got the cop cars in the front and the back. And they start leaving. I'm thinking, okay, they're going to take us to the jail. The 2 federal agents who are in the hotel, they'll realize they've got tracking on our phones, right? They'll see that we're there. and they'll come and they'll say, hey, this is a federal case, and they'll get us out and we'll be just fine, no problem. Well, they don't take us to the jail.
Oh.
They start taking us out of the city.
Oh.
Dark. This is where this
Port of Vallarta?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is where shit hits the fan, right?
Okay.
At this point, I'm as scared for the cops as I am for us.
Oh.
So here's why. So have you ever heard of Krav Maga?
Yeah.
So, for the listeners who haven't heard, regular martial arts, there's a lot of different sports things that kind of keep the opponent safe. Krav Maga is brick to the head, go home to your family. It's Israeli special forces, hand-to-hand combat. It's the most lethal on earth. Every move, they don't see, they don't talk, they don't walk. I've been training for years. I was trained to take away a gun faster than they can pull the trigger every time.
Oh, and you have your other guys with you?
My two other guys there. One was special trained as well, and the third guy was our trainer. Okay, his name was Joseph. He's what I know of Joseph. He's one of the top 10 in the world. He's one of only 10 that's qualified to go back to Israel and train the trainers.
Okay.
He's the only non-Israeli that's qualified to go train trainers every year, right?
Awesome.
Badass. Now, Joseph had 3 tequilas at dinner that night, and he was a little bit tipsy. So when they threw us on the ground, they're handcuffing us. He's laying there next to me. He's like, I'm going to effing kill him. I said, bro, you can't kill him. We don't know if they're good cops. He's on, they're bad cops. I know they're bad cops, right? And so then when they put us in the back of the pickup truck and start going out of the city, he's getting mad about it. He says, you better pull over right now. Me and Jimmy are with him. We're like, shut up, Joseph. You're going to get shot. We're all handcuffed. And and he was wanting to take them all down. Now, he was the type that probably already had figured out how to get out of his handcuffs, and he was ready to take things down. And I had on my undercover shoes, and he knew this, on my end of my lace, I had handcuff keys that were embedded on the end of my lace on each one, right? And so they finally pull over. The cops all get out of the cars. They've got their batons out, they've got their guns out, and they're starting to pull us out of the truck.
What are you thinking at this point?
Well, one of them says, you're asking for Scarface? And I said, yeah. Because at this point, if he's a bad cop, I'm going to tell him, yeah, I'm asking for Scarface.
Yeah.
If he's a good cop, then we'll get over that, right?
Right.
He says, you've been asking for Scarface? I said, yeah. Yeah. He says, I arrested him myself for selling children. I told me he was a good cop, right?
Okay.
He said, and you're going to tell me everything. And he had, his baton there. And I said, I'm really happy you said that. Now I can tell you who we really are. Okay. I said, I have 2 federal agents at my hotel room. He goes, bullshit. I said, no, give me my phone back. We'll call him right now. He says, you're not getting your phone. You're going to tell me everything. He's got his baton. And Joseph behind me. He goes, going down. I said, shut up, Joseph. These are good cops, right? Right? So I said, guys, before anything happened, I'm handcuffed. And I had my undercover pants. I had, the pants you can zip off and make them into shorts, right? So I had a zipper there. And inside the zipper part, not in the pocket, in the zipper part, there was a hidden pocket inside of the bottom part there. I said, somebody has to unzip that right now. Somebody has to unzip it. And so they unzipped it. And sure enough, there was a card that signed by the head of the federal police.
Oh,
with my picture on it.
Get out of jail.
It's my get out of jail free card, right? And I said, basically, if they don't give me their cars, their guns, they go to jail type thing.
Wow.
He looks at it and he's like, he takes it to the chief of police that's in the front car, letting his goons do all the beat up work. And he comes out shaking. They unhandcuff us faster than we were handcuffed. All 10 of them put their, lo siento, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. I said, that's how you should treat people who are buying children in your country. You should take them out in the desert and beat the shit out of them.
Yeah.
That's just what I'm good with that. However, something big's going down. I don't know who to trust. And if any of your people say anything to anyone that I just showed you that card,
you're dead.
Your entire department's under investigation. Do you understand?
Yeah.
He goes, yes, sir. We're so sorry. So of course we go back, we got the federal agents there. We finished setting up everything. That next week, largest child rescue mission in Mexico history with the 48 children.
Wow. 48 kids.
48 kids on that one.
That's unbelievable.
Now we had some where we had traffickers with guns on us. We had others where we did get arrested by dirty cops.
Yeah.
That got pretty dangerous as well.
What's the funniest thing that's ever happened?
There's that very first operation.
Yeah.
We have our waiters and our maids and our cooks. were not waiters and maids and cooks. They were undercover agents, right? They were Mexican agents. They were there, you know. They weren't very good cooks, but they were armed, type of thing, right? And we're sitting there in the middle of the negotiation with the traffickers, and our waiter comes out with a cheese plate. Now, this cheese plate wasn't cut up, had no utensils, was literally just a block of cheese. We didn't have any plates or anything. We're like, he's gonna blow our cover. this bad waiter service, you know. And then it was funny too on that one is we were setting up for the party, and we had 2 CTI agents there. These were kind of FBI type equivalents in Colombia.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And we were trying to maintain our composure with everything, keeping our head straight, and a few of us were few of the guys that were there were their religious background was one where they didn't drink alcohol. One of them was a Messianic Jew, that you know, and a couple others, and some LDS guys there, and so we had bought cases of beer. And we were pouring them all out in the ocean so we can pretend pouring them on our clothes. So it felt like we were in a big party for the day before, right? We had beer bottles hanging around and whatever else. So we're pouring all this stuff out. And these 2 CTA agents like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? We're like, well, we need to make it look like we had a big party here. So we're pouring these out. And, you know, we're not interested in drinking right now. And they're like, well, we are. So we'll help you with that. So
oh, so the agents got to imbibe a little.
they weren't very effective at the event, but they were.
Okay.
So,
wow, crazy! What an unbelievable bunch of stories. I bet we could talk for hours on that.
and I'll show you some videos later that'll just blow your mind on the takedown.
Can I go back to the question though about you're seeing all of this dark stuff? I mean, like the darkest that human beings can come up with. And I can feel the anxiety and the adrenaline and the focus of being on the mission and the drive to help these kids and then getting these kids and rescuing them, but then seeing all the scars and the wounds. How do you and your team cope with that when you get back from Haiti to the United States? That stuff I know what you've told me, and it kept me up for nights. How did you clean that out of your soul?
I'll 2 or 3 things. We were blowing through undercover operators. You know, I had guys that 300 missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, already had PTSD. One mission with us, and seeing a menu with children's faces and the prices of the different services just took them over the top. They just couldn't deal with it anymore. And you know, I had a company in my 20s that helped people with anxiety, depression, PTSD. And so I had a lot of cognitive restructuring things that we help people deal with, some of the things like that. But this was darkness beyond anything I had encountered before. And some of us as operators our home life was already a disaster, and it turned it into more of a disaster.
Oh.
And I'm gonna touch on one thing that I'm very passionate about. Well, you can actually edit this part. I'm going to ask you first. So my biggest transformation in that for my operators was the proper use of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy.
Okay. Interesting.
You know,
good.
And a lot of some of our podcasters are like, I don't want to talk about that. You know, others are like, you know what? It's going to be legalized anyway in the next few years.
Yeah.
Talk about the proper use so it doesn't go down the wrong road. So if you're okay with it, that's really where my transformation and a lot of my operators came from, is getting rid of that darkness. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we can maybe save that for another talk.
Okay. Then I'll skip it on that one, and I'll just say, I had to recognize the toxicity in my own life that was contributing. And what I mean by it is this.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I was risking my life to save the kids, but then I would come home and I was in a dysfunctional marriage. You know, I would try to find happiness with one more party, one more car,
one more watch, one more
watch, one more girl. You know, it was toxic. And I had a couple of my operators who, said, Paul, do you trust us? And I said, I trust you with my life. And they said, well, you need to come to this meditation and this healing retreat. And that changed everything. What happened for me is I was able to, in a deep state of meditation, together with some facilitators, and people think that meditation is different than prayer. No, it's prayer too many times is a one-sided conversation with God.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Petition,
praise,
petition.
praise.
Yeah.
Sorry, fix. You know,
right.
that's not a conversation.
Right.
You know, and so meditation is simply the allowing of that conversation to come the other way. That's all that it is.
And
for
then
me.
the psilocybin opens that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk about that here, but I will if you want to.
No. Well, we only have. Oh, we got.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Oh, sorry, we can go a little bit. I'm
sure?
good with that. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I
Well-
can go with that. But I would love to explain that if we want to on this one, but I can go deeper on the other one as well.
Well,
So-
let's touch on a little bit because I'd like to get some more information from you about what can parents do, what can kids do that are in the middle of it. Like if you were to be able to go with what you know now back to your own 13, 14-year-old self. So let's just, so the psilocybin is a facilitator with facilitators.
Well,
to help.
and we can't bring that up unless people understand how important it is to use it right.
Oh, yeah. So,
Otherwise, we don't even want to bring it up because too many people will go down the wrong road and destroy their lives going down the wrong road. In the right environment, it creates a place where the facilitator can go deep and pull out some darkness, pull out some trauma. It is a form of anesthesia from an emotional standpoint that allows somebody to really do some deep work. So
does
aside from that,
does it kind of block the part of your brain that, or open a part of your brain?
No. Here's what it is. So when we're little kids, we're in this state of neuroplasticity.
Yep.
We're very, very impressionable, right? We can learn 3 languages at the same time when we're 3 years old, type of a thing. Then after 7, 8 years old, it kind of hardens, and it takes 21 days to create a new habit.
Right.
And and 95% of our life is controlled by that subconscious mind. And when darkness comes into it, whether it was a past relationship that was super heavy, whether it was something that happened when we were a kid, whether it's going undercover and seeing the darkest part of humanity, when that kind of darkness gets in there, it controls a lot of our life in anger issues and low self-esteem and anxiety and stress, anxiety. Yeah. This thing just goes on and on and on. And so what happened is in that state, the facilitator put me into this state of hyperneuroplasticity with the proper use of the psilocybin.
Yeah.
And this changed everything for me and my undercover operators in every way. What happened was in this state, I connected. First of all, it was the most horrific experience of my life.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Horrific because for me, it was beautiful and horrific at the same time. For me, I felt a perfect connection with everybody in my life. I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them.
When you're on the psilocybin.
Yes.
Okay.
Guided by the facilitator, right? And then I felt the joy that the children felt when we helped to rescue them, as if I was them reuniting with their families.
Wow.
And then I felt the pain that the guy who was at my party and broke up his family because he slept with a cheerleader, whatever it was, the ripple effect of my actions. And then I even felt it further on, that guy that broke up his family because he was at my party. Now, a year later, a fatherless home, the daughter gets knocked up or raped or whatever, the son gets
chain reactions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it was so profound in terms of my ego death. And then being able to separate myself in this state of pure light and love, feeling that from my creator God. And that light and that healing was so profound. And then what it also did is it solidified my relationship with God in a way that I never had my whole life. In fact, I'm in this neuroplasticity state. We're not talking about microdosing. We're talking 3 to 6 grams, enough where you need help to go to the bathroom type of thing.
And
right?
don't go do this without somebody.
If you are in the wrong atmosphere with a wrong
Don't go
space,
do it. I'll tell you a story about Halloween in Madison, Wisconsin.
Well, and that's where we have, in the last 4 retreats that we've had, we have 100% of the people that have been there said it was the #1 most positively transformational week of their entire life, bar none. Nothing even came close to it.
So
and it's
you do retreats now yourself? Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
we do full 7-day, fully immersive transformational retreats for anybody who is holding on to any kind of pain
Trauma, okay.
that they need to release. And so for me and for my operators, that was with a trained facilitator who understood how to set sacred space, use the music playlist from Johns Hopkins University, know how to set the environment, everything else was so powerful in releasing that. But really what it did is it brought us with an anchored connection with God.
Okay.
You know, so however
are
you
you-
get there, but that is something that created more of an anchored connection with God than I had ever experienced in my life, and that was necessary.
So how did that help you differentiate from seeing that horror to being able to feel that love? So how does because those memories and those sights and those visions,
course.
those images are still there. How does that not affect you now after doing this?
I meditate every day.
Okay.
You know, I only do the psilocybin about once a year, once every 6 months that I'm actually there. I facilitate once a month.
Right.
But my prayer and meditation every day is a very systematic way of feeling the divine love of God flowing through me. I teach people how through breath work, starting with a prayer, going into a breath work session, going into a deep meditation, how they can see and feel that love of God flowing through their heart and dissipating the darkness. I did this
So
just
it pushes
today
the darkness out.
at a conference I did today. At the very end of the conference, I took everybody into a quick 15-minute meditation where I dropped them into that space, and we did what I call a cord cutting, releasing the negative energies. I use a format similar to what you would call Ho'oponopono.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Ho'oponopono, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
It's I'm sorry, I forgive you, I'm grateful, and I love you. And it's we take them into this state, and in this meditative space, I have them set sacred space, put a protection around them, bring in something that was negative in their life, you know, an uncle that raped them, or a difficult experience with an ex-wife, whatever it is, or even an addiction, or even a former version of yourself. And in that space, dissipate that darkness by using that. I'm sorry to this former version of me. I'm sorry. I forgive you to my father who did this or that. I'm grateful for the things I learned from that, and then dissipate it with love. And I'm going to be doing a podcast where I go in detail about how to do this meditation.
Okay.
But that's something that the facilitator taught us.
Okay.
And releasing that negativity freed up.
So that's how
much
you're able
anxiety
to
and stress.
continue doing this 70 more times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I don't want kids going out there and dropping acid or buying shrooms from.
Well, here's
some
the thing.
uncle's
Do not
thing.
ever drop acid.
Yeah.
Ever. Do not ever. This is people that put LSD and acid and shrooms in the same bucket do not understand what I just said for the last 10 minutes.
Okay.
This is there's 180 different strands of psilocybin.
Right.
And a trained facilitator will know those 180 different strands, know exactly what each one can do, and don't do it in the US because it's not legal yet.
Yeah.
But find a trained, people can go to liberatinghumanity.com and get all the information they need.
Okay. Let me shift to kids though, because I don't want to see kids just going out and try to do this on their own. This is
no,
for
but not
adults.
even an adult should do it on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
So shifting back to kids who pick a situation, you know, a 13-year-old girl whose father's divorced, got remarried, has a step monster who hates her and gaslights her and doesn't want her to have any attention. Pick any of those situations on up to, you know, weird Uncle Harry is molesting her every night. What do you suggest that these kids can do who are in the middle of this? What would be the top two things?
Number one, find a parent or a relative that can be your 911.
Okay.
Preferably somebody who
You trust.
you know, who you really do trust. And kids have intuition. They know they know when something's not feeling right. You know who you
Yeah.
can trust. You
Yeah,
know, those
your-
kids will know. And
Your spidey senses kick
yeah,
in.
and find somebody that you can go to, that you can confide in. You can say, "Hey, listen, this is a really difficult time. This
So
is something I'm going
speak up
through."
to somebody you trust. Tell them what's
Absolutely.
going on.
And adults, when a child comes to you and says something like this happened, do not ever brush it under the rug. There's a very, very, very high 95, 99% plus chance that they are not lying. They're not making up the story. Kids don't make up stories like this. And there is some challenges going on.
What do you see as like, so you've seen all these kids who were in just stuck in this hellhole, pit of hell. What was the number one or number two things that they did, these survivors did to survive? How did they handle that?
When they're in the situation, they go into survival mode, which is just turning off emotions, turning off everything. I remember there was a little girl that was 14 years old. She was taken when she was 7. She was abused almost every day, 10, 20 times a day, being sold by her traffickers for 7 years. And she, when we rescued her, she didn't say one word for 2 weeks after we rescued her.
She was nonverbal?
Nonverbal, not one word. And the first words she said were, "I didn't think anybody would come."
Oh, dude.
She had given up hope, completely given up hope. Now, here's what's interesting. When we pull these kids out of hell, and we know they were in that kind of hell, we can immediately get them the love, the help, the healing that they need. What's more damaging is when you've got a 12-year-old in a quote unquote healthy home in the United States that somebody she trusts, her stepdad, her grandpa, her uncle, does something like that to her over and over again and tells her that her parents will hate her if she says anything, controls her through fear, and she doesn't get the help immediately that she needs. And it is buried. It's kind of like a deep wound that gets infected. You cover that up and don't do anything about it, you're going to lose your arm. You might lose your life, right?
Faster
And so she carries that pain her whole life, coming out in anger issues and dysfunctional relationships and anxiety and depression and PTSD and addictions. And these are things that are more traumatizing. We found that if we can get the kids, when we help pull them out of hell, we know they were there, we can immediately get the love, the help, the healing that they need to live a somewhat normal life.
Yeah, okay. So there is a lot of hope there.
There's a lot of hope there. And it's so important that kids who have been through that, and even adults that have been through that kind of trauma, talk about it.
Yeah.
Get it out of your system so we can stop festering and stop showing up in these unhealthy behaviors.
Stop perpetuating it.
Exactly.
The generational nonsense.
Exactly.
What else could somebody do who's still in that toxic situation and that doesn't look like there's hope to get out? So talk to a trusted advisor, but how does somebody get the courage to go even find somebody who would be a trusted person? How would you suggest a kid, a 13, 14-year-old kid start? What would be the first thing?
I would, if you can't start by talking to an adult, start by talking to a trusted peer. This is where I was in high school, And, if your high school has a peer counseling type of a program, which a lot of them
squads.
do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's where I started out, was as a peer counselor. And so a lot of times kids just don't feel comfortable talking to these things to an adult. And so if they can talk to a peer counselor, then you can garner the strength to take it to somebody who can start making.
And then if you're a peer counselor, you tell an adult that you trust?
It depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Depends on the situation. But mostly just having that peer counselor there will give the victim the strength that they need to then go to an adult who they can trust.
Copy. Gotcha. What is What is the state of trafficking since the beginning 10 years ago when you started this till now? Is it better, worse, the same?
That's the sad thing is, when I made that commitment on that first mission, when I'm sitting there eye to eye with this little girl, and I made that commitment, I'm going to dedicate my life to eradicating this. I realized 10 years later that there's more children being sold today than there was 10 years ago.
More.
And, sadly, it's coming on different forms. We've had 130,000 children a year being brought across the border, unaccompanied, undocumented minors that got lost in the system. Lots of challenges there. And so I realized that after 10 years of doing this work, the pulling the kids out of hell was never going to fix the problem. We needed to pull the hell out of humanity.
Okay.
We needed to help the adults heal what they need to, so that we don't end up with domestic abuse and sexual abuse in the home, or things like child trafficking. Somebody doesn't just go to Colombia and decide he's going to go end up with a 12-year-old. No, he was already abusing things in his own neighborhood, and he was already going down a dark road. And so
what starts that? I mean, let's say it doesn't start with the kid that was abused, which I've heard you say that it's a high probability that somebody's abused will become an abuser. But how does some guy suddenly decide to go to XYZ country? And
nobody suddenly decides anything. There's a lot of
what happens?
There's a lot of links in the chain, and you'll see, in the Child Liberation Foundation, we have a barcode, which is the universal sign of something being sold, and a chain in the middle with a broken chain and broken link on it. Because the key is, if that end link of that chain is abuse of a child, we want to make sure that nobody ever gets close to that link. So you have to ask yourself, what led to that? Was it child pornography? Was it other partner? Was it, there's a lot of other things. Now, here's the thing. Almost everybody who's watching this today has viewed pornography. Just because you've looked at pornography doesn't mean you're going to become a pedophile. However, almost every one of the guys that we arrested started out with a hardcore addiction.
So they were addicted to porn?
Yeah, and a lot of guys are like, well, I look at them, I'm not addicted. Well, if you're not addicted, then why don't you give it up for 2 years and tell me how that goes?
Yeah.
There's addictions there. And just like any hardcore addiction, like cocaine or heroin, some guys need something harder to have that same fix. And for some of them, harder is a little bit, rape videos or violence type sex, or for some of them, harder is a little bit younger. Pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And then they're acting out on these horrific fantasies, which is creating a tsunami of demand for these heinous acts.
So is it like an adrenaline rush that they get off of that, or?
No, I don't think it's for some. There's it's something that it's a dark energy that is tied to destroying innocence.
Yeah.
If you get a thrill off of driving your truck across a beautiful bed of roses or something, you're probably the same kind of energy, right? This is a destroying innocence type of thing. And I go back to Ephesians 6:12. This is not a battle of flesh and blood. Principalities and darkness, and that's really what this is about. This is a spiritual war.
So what if there's these kids are inundated, that in their pocket they've got access to all this shit. Well, some kids now starting to become addicted to porn. What would you suggest that they do? What's the next step for somebody who's got this attachment to it?
Yeah, and so many are. The average 12, 13-year-old, if you're their dad, you don't ask them, have you ever looked at porn? You say, when's the last time you looked at it? Because I guarantee they have. And it's creating this sick mindset of, the very second that you take a woman from a divine feminine to an object, you start going down a dark road. And these kids need to understand that these addictions are so unfulfilling that they are one of the primary things that will lead to low self-esteem and guilt and shame and potentially suicidal thoughts, etc., because they can't break free it. And there's plenty of resources to help people break free of these addictions.
Okay.
And of all of them, just like Alcoholics Anonymous has, I think, either 4 or 5 of the 12 steps have God included in them.
Yeah.
The same thing with Sexual Addicts Anonymous.
Okay.
It's almost the same format, and the acknowledgement of a higher power is a huge step, and acknowledging that I'm powerless by myself, that I need God's help in the process. You know, these are all things that are incredibly important in that rehabilitation. It's we might have to go to our knees and look upwards to be able to get out of the hole that we're in.
So let's say you got like a kid who's brought up in a uber rigid, restrictive religious environment and tiptoed into porn, and he doesn't know where to go, and now he's kind of addicted and stuck to it, and he's already kind of in that realm where he's going to God. What is that kid?
I would just say there's a different. We can go for another 3 hours on the subject of whether most religions are bringing you closer or farther from God, you know.
Well,
but,
yeah,
but there's,
so
there's
if he's got an identity of what God is.
The problem is if his relationship with God is built upon judgment, shame, guilt, remorse, fear-based, needing to be worthy to be loved by God, all of that stuff is actually keeping him stuck.
So what would be the first step for that kid?
First step is recognizing that you are loved unconditionally
by us. We love you.
We love you, and God loves you.
If nobody else, us and God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I get into my meditative space, in order for me to go deep there, I have to feel that unconditional love of God, infinite love flowing through my heart and then flowing out to not only my family, my friends, but to all of humanity. So in reality, you know, talking to the camera, absolutely. I hope that everybody can feel that infinite, unconditional love of God flowing through you and I to them. And that is the beginning of healing. That's where all healing starts, is because when you feel that love of God and you start loving yourself, all addictions, all of this stuff comes from people not recognizing the divinity within them.
How do you block that? Because so this kid is 15, 16, 17 years old. All right. And he's been brought up in this environment. He's already self-shaming, but he's addicted to it. And he's already like feeling unworthy, can't go to God. If he does go to God, it's under guilt, shame, fear, punishment, punitive, not love. What is that first step? I hear you saying that. Really hear you saying that, but I like
change your perception of God.
Okay.
That's a big one right there. Change your perception from a fear, from a jealous God, a vengeful God, from a judgmental God to
Old
a
Testament.
God, from an Old Testament to
New Testament.
Well, and more than New Testament. People ask me, they say, Paul, are you a Christian? And my answer is in the purest sense of the word. Okay. When you really start delving into the words of Christ, the words of Yeshua. I say Yeshua because Jesus wasn't even his name. People don't say by Jesus. His name was Yeshua. And so the pure, unbiased, unchanged words and recognizing where those are and where those aren't. You know, I'm just going to throw this out for people just to do your own research, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John spent time with Christ. Mm-hmm. Paul did not.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a different energy in the letters, the epistles of Paul, including the Acts of the Romans, etc. The different energy, very tied to the Sadducees and Pharisees and the way that he was actually trained, versus the words that Jesus taught of peace, of love, of connection.
I hear you. And then I'm thinking also, but he talks about pummeling his body lest he becomes a reprobate, do damage to himself. And that is the message I feel like, because I struggle with shame even now, like I'm not worthy. And I can feel like this kid who's stuck in this loop, being stuck feeling like encouraged and then feeling less than, and then being sucked off, getting the devil whispering in his ear. Suddenly his phone flips up and there's whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's guilt, shame, can't go talk to anybody. So
loop keeps you. That low frequency of guilt and shame versus the high frequency of infinite love is the answer to the riddle.
Okay.
Right there is just understanding that love of God.
Yeah.
That is what is healing. It is infinitely healing. And will dissipate the darkness. The light doesn't have to fight the darkness.
Right.
The presence of that love, the presence of that light, simply the darkness is gone. It was never there. It is gone. And so within that light of truth, that light of love, that light of divine connection with God, that is not separate, not a God is over there in some distant universe. No, that the creator, the God within you, that light of God that we all share, that oneness that we share with each other, that oneness that we share with our creator is healing in every way. And is the only way to break free of these things that are incredibly difficult to break free of.
Drowning in blue light. It's messing with your melatonin and focus. Find your calm. Protect your vibe with Lucia Eyes.
grab a pair at luciaeyes.com. We block blue light, not sleep. Use code YALLCAST for 20% off. What's your superpower?
It's so funny when I think it was on one of the Avengers, and everybody was talking about their superpowers, and they asked Batman, they asked Bruce Wayne, "What's your superpower?"
Yeah, freaking Bruce Wayne, right?
I'm rich. That's what he said. He said, "I'm rich." I used to joke about that one a lot, but I truly believe that it really helps. When you want to throw a bunch of money at a movie to try to create global change, then it helps to have some cash that you can say, all right, this may not ever come back, but here you go, right?
Yeah, okay.
But I truly believe that my greatest superpower, which is an absolute gift from God, is the ability to feel that infinite love and allow it to flow through me in a healing way to those who I spend time with.
Yeah, I get that from you every time we're together.
Yeah, it is.
Always.
There's zero conditions on my love. I love you infinitely.
Amen.
In everything that you are, everything that you've been through. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, whatever has gone on in your life. I love you as the Son of God that you are. And I think that is and always has been my greatest strength.
Every kid needs to hear that message.
Yeah.
Every kid needs to hear that message. Last question. I know you got to scoot. So you were the executive producer of the movie Sound of Freedom. Are you going to do any other movies?
My wife is a producer and an actor. You can see some of her movies online, and she's taken over that part of the family business. She's putting together some scripts. We've been approached by a number of people who want to take some of the other stories that are in the Sound of Freedom book. Make sure that your audience goes on to Amazon and looks for Sound of Freedom book.
Go buy the book, Sound of Freedom. Paul Hutchinson.
Incredible. It will give parents the tools they need to keep their kids safe. It will give the kids they need, the tools they need to be aware and keep themselves safe.
Yeah.
And so, I think there is going to be some other ones. It's not going to be another one of show you more darkness. It's more of, okay, now what do we do? What does healing look like? What is the next steps? Because just showing you more undercover missions isn't going to fix the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why I would do another movie, is if we can make a significant impact on fixing the problem.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
LiberatingHumanity.com. Yep, liberatinghumanity.com. On any of your social media, you can just go to Liberating Humanity and find links to me there, and or you can find me on Amazon on Sound of Freedom book.
Awesome. I am so humbled and grateful, filled with love and wonderful experience having you here. I always enjoy talking to you, and thank you so much for being our first guest on the YALLCAST.
I love that. Thank you. Super
Thanks,
grateful.
y'all. YALLCAST disclaimer. Welcome to YALLCAST, where opinions are strong, the coffee is stronger, and absolutely nothing you hear should replace your doctor, lawyer, therapist, or your grandmother's advice. Everything you see or hear here on the podcast, videos, live streams, all of it is for entertainment and information purposes only. The thoughts and opinions you hear belong to whoever is talking and not necessarily to YALLCAST, our partners, affiliates, sponsors, or the great state of Texas. We try to get things right, but hey, like you, we're human, and all information provided is as is, with no reps, warranties, guarantees, and definitely no refunds if you take it too seriously. So if you make a life decision based on this show, we hope it's a good one, but that's on you. Nothing here counts as medical, legal, financial, or relationship advice. If you need that, please go talk to a professional. Sometimes we shout out to brands or products. Most of the time, that's just conversation. But yes, occasionally it's stuff we use every day and genuinely love. YALLCAST and everyone involved here are released, indemnified, and held harmless from whatever happens next. We're just here to make you think, laugh, and maybe question blue light or your Wi-Fi connection. So listen smart, laugh loud, and remember, if you're looking for legal or medical advice, you're on the wrong podcast.